It was a bright morning, and Sarah was filled with excitement as she walked through the busy airport terminal. Today was the day she was going to take a much-needed vacation. She had been planning this trip for months, an escape to the sun and sand, far from the noise and stress of daily life. With her first-class ticket in hand, she confidently approached the check-in counter. Sarah had always worked hard, and this trip was her well-deserved reward for years of dedication at her job. The anticipation of settling into the luxurious comfort of first class made her smile. She stood in line, watching other passengers checking in smoothly, their faces full of anticipation, just like hers. As Sarah approached the counter, the agent looked up and greeted her with a smile. She returned the greeting, feeling the sense of privilege that came with flying first class. She handed over her ticket, expecting the usual seamless process. But to her surprise, the agent paused as he scanned the ticket, his brow furrowing slightly. Sarah raised an eyebrow, sensing something was wrong. The agent seemed to be searching for something on his screen, his fingers typing quickly. A brief silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint hum of the airport in the background. Sarah shifted her weight, a small knot beginning to form in her stomach. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I'm afraid there's a problem with your seating," the agent said, his tone slightly clipped. "Your ticket does show first class, but unfortunately, we are unable to allow you to board in that section. You'll have to take a seat in economy." Sarah blinked, sure she had heard him wrong. "I'm sorry, did you say economy?" "But my ticket is for first class," she replied, her voice calm but starting to carry a hint of confusion. The agent glanced at her again, his expression unmoving. "Yes, Mom, that's correct. There seems to have been an error, and we are unable to let you board in first class. The seat assignments have been changed. You'll be placed in economy." Sarah was stunned. She had never heard of anything like this. First class was not just a luxury for her. It was something she had earned through countless hours of hard work. She had specifically purchased the first-class ticket, looking forward to the extra space, the comfort, and the quiet that came with it. But here she was, being told to go to economy, without any explanation. She felt the eyes of the other passengers on her as they overheard the conversation. Some seemed curious, while others looked away uncomfortably. She wasn't sure if she was more surprised by the rejection or the embarrassment that was beginning to wash over her. Taking a deep breath, Sarah decided to remain composed. "Could you explain why this is happening?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "My ticket clearly says first class." The agent didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked back at his screen, as though trying to find something that could justify his words. After a few moments of awkward silence, he finally said, "I'm afraid that's all I can do. You'll need to go to the gate and wait for further instructions." Sarah felt a rush of frustration. She had traveled enough to know how airlines typically handled issues like these. There were always mistakes, glitches in the system, but this felt different. This felt personal. Why was she being singled out? Why was she being told she couldn't sit in the seat she had paid for, while others were ushered through the process without any issues? Still trying to keep her composure, she asked, "Can I speak to a supervisor or manager? This doesn't make any sense." The agent seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then shook his head. "I'm afraid that's not possible at the moment. You'll have to make do with the economy seating." Sarah stood there, momentarily speechless. How was this even happening? She glanced around, noticing that the people behind her in line were getting impatient, shifting from foot to foot as they waited. She could feel the tension building inside her, but she refused to break down in front of the crowd. She straightened her back, her hand still gripping the ticket. "Are you saying there is nothing you can do?" she asked, her voice growing firmer. "I paid for first-class service, and I am entitled to that." The agent's expression remained neutral, almost robotic. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am. You'll need to follow the instructions at the gate." Sarah's heart raced with a mixture of disbelief and anger. How could this be happening? She had read countless stories about people being treated unfairly, but she never imagined it would happen to her. This wasn't just about a seat on a plane. This was about respect, dignity, and the assumption that she could be treated as lesser, despite paying for the same services as everyone else. Without another word, Sarah turned and walked away from the counter. Her mind raced, trying to process the surreal situation she had just encountered. She couldn't believe it. How could an airline, a well-known company, treat a customer this way? As she walked towards the gate, she overheard snippets of conversations from other passengers. Some were talking about their comfortable flights and exciting vacations, while others were oblivious to the injustice unfolding right beside them. This was a moment that would change everything for Sarah. She wasn't going to let it slide. She had every right to enjoy the first-class service she had paid for. Little did she know, this incident would set off a chain of events that would not only change her life, but send a powerful message to the airline industry. As Sarah walked away from the counter, a knot tightened in her stomach. She felt a mixture of anger, confusion, and helplessness rising within her. The sheer absurdity of the situation hit her all at once. How had something as simple as a flight turned into a battle for dignity? The other passengers continued moving around her, unaware of the internal struggle she was facing. They walked past with their bags in tow, some casually sipping coffee, others lost in conversation. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing alone, trapped in a nightmare of her own making. She reached the gate area, trying to maintain her composure. She wasn't going to let anyone see how deeply this was affecting her. But inside, she felt a growing frustration. She had never been one to back down from a challenge. She had worked hard for everything she had, and this treatment, this blatant disregard for her rights, felt like an attack on her self-respect. She had paid for first class, and she deserved to be treated with the same respect as any other passenger. Sarah sat down in the waiting area, her mind racing with thoughts. She kept replaying the moment over and over again. The agent's cold demeanor, the way he had dismissed her without a second thought. It wasn't just about the seat, it was the principle. She knew that if she let this slide, it would set a dangerous precedent, not just for herself, but for anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. No one deserved to be treated this way, regardless of their background, appearance, or status. But there was another, deeper frustration that gnawed at her. It was the feeling of being invisible. She had always worked hard to break down barriers, to prove herself in a world that often overlooked people like her. She had fought to get where she was, to earn her place at the table. And yet here she was, a paying customer being told to sit in the back like she didn't matter. The injustice of it all felt like a slap in the face, and she was angry at herself for allowing this to happen. As the minutes passed, Sarah's frustration only grew. She could hear the soft chatter of other passengers, their voices filled with excitement and anticipation for the flight ahead. Meanwhile, she sat there, her palms sweating, her thoughts a whirlwind. How could an airline, of all places, behave like this? She had flown with this company countless times before, and never once had she been treated with such disrespect. It wasn't just about the flight. It was about something bigger. It was about equality, fairness, and dignity. She wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone and dialed the customer service number listed on her ticket. The ringing felt like it lasted forever, each second stretching into eternity. As the phone finally clicked, a voice on the other end answered with a generic greeting. Sarah's frustration bubbled to the surface. "I'm calling about my seat," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "I paid for a first-class ticket, and now I'm being told to sit in economy. This is unacceptable." The agent on the other end responded with a practiced calm, asking for her flight details. Sarah gritted her teeth, repeating the flight information. She could hear the agent typing, probably entering the information into the system. A few moments later, the agent's voice returned, smooth and unflustered. "I apologize for the inconvenience, Mom," the agent said, the words sounding rehearsed. "But our records show that your seat has been reassigned due to an operational issue." We can offer you a seat in economy class." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. "No, I don't want to sit in economy. I paid for first class. This is not an operational issue. This is a mistake. I need to speak to someone higher up. This isn't right." The agent hesitated, and Sarah could hear the soft clicking of keys as they typed away, probably looking for some solution. The silence was unbearable. "I understand your frustration, ma'am. I will escalate the issue to a supervisor right away. Please hold for a moment." Sarah held her breath, her frustration reaching a boiling point. She knew that this wasn't just about getting a seat on a plane. It was about standing up for herself and asserting her right to be treated with respect. She was tired of being dismissed, tired of being made to feel invisible. As the hold music played, she began to think about the countless times she had been overlooked in her life, the subtle ways in which people had dismissed her because of her skin color, her gender, or the way she spoke. This was just another instance of a world that seemed determined to make her feel like she wasn't enough, like she didn't belong. But Sarah was done. She wasn't going to sit back and take it anymore. This was her moment. She was going to make her voice heard. She had earned her place in first class, and no one, no matter their position or power, had the right to take that from her. Finally, the hold music stopped. A new voice came on the line, sharper, more authoritative. "Ma'am, I'm the supervisor. I understand you have an issue with your seat assignment." "Yes," Sarah replied, her voice firm. "I was told I couldn't sit in first class. This is unacceptable, and I demand to know why this is happening." The supervisor, to Sarah's surprise, didn't try to brush her off. Instead, they listened, carefully noting her complaint. But as Sarah spoke, something inside her shifted. She realized that this wasn't just about fighting for a seat. It was about reclaiming her dignity, about fighting for the right to be treated like everyone else. She took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. She knew that if she wanted change, she had to be strong. She had to push back, no matter what. The voice of the supervisor on the phone was calm, almost detached, but it did nothing to ease Sarah's frustration. She could hear the polite tone, the sterile professionalism, but it only fueled her anger. She had been polite enough, reasonable even, but it was clear now that this wasn't about mistakes or simple misunderstandings. This was about something deeper, something she had to confront. "I understand your concerns, ma'am," the supervisor said, but there was a hesitation in his voice. "Unfortunately, we have a full capacity on the flight, and there's no available seat in first class." Sarah clenched her jaw. She knew better than to accept such an excuse, especially when the whole situation had unfolded with the sheer arrogance of the airline staff. The lack of empathy, the cold dismissal, it was all building up inside her, and she couldn't take it anymore. She had worked too hard for this moment, and she wasn't going to let them treat her like she was insignificant. Taking a deep breath, Sarah made a decision in that instant. This wasn't a conversation she could resolve with polite pleasantries. If she wanted justice, she had to take bold action. She had to use her voice, her power, and reach for something bigger than herself, something that would make them listen. Without warning, Sarah ended the call with the supervisor. She didn't have time to waste anymore. She needed a stronger solution, one that would make her issue impossible to ignore. She pulled up her contacts, scanning the list until she found the number she was looking for. It was a number she had never dialed before, but she knew it was the one that could make all the difference. It was the direct line to the airline CEO. Sarah had heard whispers about this number before, from colleagues and friends who had faced similar battles with larger companies. It was said to be a last resort, a lifeline for customers who felt like they had been wronged. And today, Sarah was not going to let a company like this get away with treating her as less than she was. This was her fight, and she would not back down. Her fingers shook slightly as she dialed the number, but her mind was sharp, focused. The phone rang a few times, each one feeling like an eternity. She wasn't sure if anyone would even pick up, but she wasn't going to let that stop her. She had to try. After what seemed like forever, the phone clicked, and a calm, professional voice answered on the other end. "Hello, this is James Harding, CEO of Skyway Airlines. How can I assist you today?" Sarah's heart raced, but she stayed composed. She knew this was her chance, the moment she had been waiting for. She wasn't just speaking to any customer service agent or supervisor. She was speaking to the person at the very top. She could feel the weight of her words as she prepared to make them count. "Mr. Harding," Sarah began, her voice steady but full of determination. "I'm calling because I've been denied my seat in first class. I paid for that seat, and I was told that I could not sit there because of some error. I've spoken to your staff, but the treatment I've received is unacceptable. I'm being forced to sit in economy when I've paid for first-class service." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Sarah could feel the tension building. She wasn't sure how he would respond, but she knew she had made the right choice by making this call. This was the moment she could no longer be ignored. "I see," Mr. Harding replied after a pause. His tone had shifted, becoming more attentive. "I apologize for the inconvenience you've experienced. Can you tell me more about what happened?" Sarah didn't hesitate. She explained everything in detail: the way the agent had treated her, the dismissive attitude, and how she had been told to go to the back of the plane. As she spoke, she could hear the change in his voice, a shift from corporate indifference to genuine concern. It was as if her words had finally reached him. "I am so sorry for what you've gone through," Mr. Harding said, his voice now tinged with sincerity. "This is not how we expect our customers to be treated. I'll make sure this is resolved immediately. Please, stay right where you are, and I'll ensure you are escorted to your proper seat in first class." Sarah's chest tightened with relief, but she wasn't done yet. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing it for every person who had ever been treated like they didn't belong. She had a chance to make a change, even if it was small, but it could send a powerful message. "Thank you, Mr. Harding," she said, her voice steady but grateful. "But I need to make sure that no one else has to go through what I did. This should never happen again." "I completely agree," he replied. "I'm going to make sure that proper training is implemented, and we'll work to ensure that this never happens again. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, and I will personally make sure your situation is rectified. We'll get you back to first class immediately." Sarah felt the weight of the situation lift off her shoulders. She had done it. Her frustration had been transformed into action. She wasn't going to let her story be one of being mistreated and overlooked. Instead, it had become a story of power and change. As Sarah hung up the phone, a sense of calm settled over her. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. The staff at the gate were visibly nervous when they saw her walking back toward them. Within moments, they had quickly moved to accommodate her, showing her the respect she had always deserved. She was escorted to her rightful first-class seat, her journey now set in motion. But this was no ordinary flight. For Sarah, this moment would mark the beginning of something much bigger, an empowering realization that she had the power to fight back, to make a difference, and to stand up for what was right. And that, in the end, was the most powerful action of all. The moment Sarah stepped back into the airport terminal after her call with Mr. Harding, she could feel a shift in the air. The bustling noise of the passengers faded as she walked with a newfound confidence. It was as if the entire atmosphere had changed, the tension she had felt moments ago now replaced with a calm resolve. The weight of the injustice she had experienced still lingered, but she no longer felt helpless. Her voice had been heard, and she was about to witness how far one determined individual could go to make a change. As she approached the gate, the staff members who had previously dismissed her were no longer acting with their usual indifference. Instead, they looked visibly uncomfortable, perhaps knowing that they had just been part of a situation that was about to get much bigger than any of them had anticipated. Sarah's eyes scanned the area for the airline supervisor, whom she had spoken to earlier, and found him standing in the distance, a phone pressed to his ear. As soon as he saw her walking towards him, His expression immediately shifted to one of nervousness. He quickly ended his call and approached Sarah. "Ma'am, we have spoken with the higher-ups, and I must sincerely apologize for the inconvenience this has caused you. Please, let me escort you to your seat." The supervisor's words were filled with an almost exaggerated politeness, his voice noticeably quieter than before. It was as if the entire dynamic had shifted, the power of Sarah's actions now visible to all. With no further hesitation, the supervisor led her to the first-class cabin, his steps quick and hurried. Sarah walked beside him, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. The rows of luxurious seats, which had once felt so out of reach, now felt like they belonged to her, as they should have from the beginning. She had paid for this seat, and nothing, absolutely nothing, could take that away from her. As they neared the first-class section, a flight attendant who had been standing nearby immediately approached Sarah with a warm, almost apologetic smile. "Ma'am, we are so sorry for the mix-up earlier. We've arranged for you to be seated right here." The attendant gestured to a spacious seat by the window, complete with a blanket, pillow, and a personal entertainment screen. It was everything Sarah had imagined when she first booked the flight. But more than that, it was the recognition of her worth. She wasn't just another passenger. She was someone who had fought for her rights and won. As Sarah settled into her seat, she glanced back at the gate area. The same staff who had once treated her like an inconvenience were now watching her from a distance, their faces filled with uncertainty. Perhaps they were wondering how it had all unraveled so quickly, how one call could change everything. But Sarah knew that this wasn't just about getting back to her rightful place in first class. This was about something bigger. This was about the power of persistence, the power of making your voice heard in the face of injustice. She leaned back in her chair, her thoughts drifting back to the phone call with Mr. Harding. His calm voice had been reassuring, but it was the swift action he took that had sealed the deal. Within minutes of speaking to him, the entire situation had been turned around. Sarah knew that had she not made that call, nothing would have changed. She would still be sitting in the economy section, humiliated and ignored. But instead, she had made the decision to speak up, and that decision had set everything in motion. The plane began to taxi down the runway, and Sarah's mind wandered to the bigger picture. Her actions had not only secured her own seat, but they had also sent a powerful message to the airline, that their customers deserved respect, dignity, and fairness. She had challenged an unjust system and come out victorious. But the battle was far from over. This wasn't just about one woman and one flight. It was about every person who had ever been overlooked, dismissed, or treated unfairly. As the plane soared into the sky, Sarah felt a sense of empowerment like never before. She had faced down an obstacle that many would have simply accepted, but she had refused to back down. She had made a choice to fight, and in doing so, she had not only secured a seat in first class, but had also proved to herself and the world that one person, standing firm, could create ripples of change. In the days that followed, Sarah's story spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up the story of the woman who had taken on an airline and won. Social media exploded with support, and many people reached out to her, sharing their own experiences with discrimination and mistreatment. The impact of her actions reached beyond her personal victory. It had sparked a conversation about fairness and equality in the travel industry. More and more people were encouraged to stand up for themselves, to demand better treatment, and to use their voices to hold companies accountable. The airline, too, had learned an important lesson. Sarah's call had forced them to reevaluate their policies and customer service practices. The incident prompted the company to issue a public apology and commit to better training for their staff to ensure that no other passenger would ever face such mistreatment. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it was a step in the right direction. As Sarah arrived at her destination, she felt a profound sense of satisfaction. She had fought for what was right, and she had succeeded. The journey was more than just a flight. It was a symbol of the power of persistence, of speaking out, and of the courage it takes to make a difference. The resolution wasn't just about the airline. It was about Sarah's own personal victory, a victory that was shared by everyone who had ever been dismissed or ignored, proving that with one call, everything could change.